Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Hackney Council's Planning Subcommittee meeting. My name is Councillor Jessica Webb, and I will be chairing this evening's meeting. This meeting will be recorded and is being live streamed on YouTube and is also being transcribed. Councillors taking part in voting this evening are present here in the council chamber. Welcome to any members of the public who have joined us in the chamber or on live stream. May I also welcome members of the press. For anyone joining the meeting remotely via Google Meet, there is a chat function. However, please only use this to raise IT-related issues. As chair of the subcommittee, I will not be monitoring it, and it does not form part of the minutes of this meeting. Meeting participants are reminded to turn off their mobile phones or put it on silent. Also, please note any persistent disruptive behaviour and you will be asked to leave the meeting. In the event of an internet outage, we will adjourn the meeting and then come back and continue once resolved. I'll now turn to my fellow planning subcommittee members and ask them to please introduce themselves, starting from the front.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Root for Victoria Ward.
Councillor Michael Dersman, Hackney Downs Ward.
Councillor John Norcross, Haggerston.
Councillor Sheila Suso-Runga, Hackney Central Ward.
Councillor Claire Potter, Brownswood Ward.
Councillor Ali Sadek, Kings Park Ward.
Thank you very much. Those in attendance this evening will note that there are various council officers present at this meeting. This evening, council officers here, we have our legal officer, Courtney Blackwood-Swarby. Hello. Our development manager, enforcement manager, John Sang. Our governance services, Gareth Sykes and Jessica.
Oh, Jessica was there.
Yes. Oh, right, not Jessica. Okay, fine. Some of you joining us this evening would have contacted the governance officer in advance of this meeting to register to speak in objection or in support of the applications on this evening's agenda. Before we continue, I will briefly outline how this meeting will proceed. We will hear the planning applications summarised by the planning officer. We will then hear representations from objectors, followed by the representations from those speaking in support of the applications. Members of the planning subcommittee will then be free to ask questions of the planning officer, objectors, or the applicant, or supporters of the application. In my role as chair of this planning subcommittee, I will ensure that committee members have everything that they need to make a decision, that objectors and applicants have the opportunity to set out their case, and that the meeting runs properly. I will not be taking any contributions from the floor. You must have given notice to the governance officer before the meeting to register to speak. The deadline for registering to speak was 4 p.m. yesterday, and the list is closed. Subcommittee members are not representing their wards or their political parties. Members will make decisions on the basis of site visits that they've made, what we have read in the published application report, and of course what we hear this evening. We must make any decision on an application in accordance with the council's development plan, including the council's local plan and the London plan, unless relevant material planning considerations indicate otherwise. Subcommittee members are reminded not to take into account or discuss non-material planning matters. When taking a decision, members should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to this meeting. Similarly, if a member has any interests relating to an application on the meeting agenda, they must consider whether that interest ought to be disclosed, and where appropriate, they must withdraw from the meeting while the application is discussed and voted upon. When we have finished our deliberations on a planning application, I will read out the recommendation as set out in the published application report, and then members will vote on the recommendation by raising their hand so that the governance officer can record the vote. When the decision is made, that is normally the end of the matter for the subcommittee. The applicant may appeal our decision and objectors may seek legal redress. I advise you to seek legal advice in either case. We will now continue with the published meeting agenda. And we'll begin with apologies for absence.
Chair, I'm not aware of any apologies for absence beyond Councillor Levy, who's got dispensation. But I do notice on my screen that Councillor Samatar has joined us virtually or remotely, and just for the public record, and any committee members who are accessing this meeting remotely, they are reminded they are not counted as being present for the purposes of the Local Government Act 1972, and they may not vote on any items under consideration, but at the discretion of the chair, they may, however, contribute to the discussion and participate in a non-decision making capacity. Also, I'm looking across the room. I don't see Councillor Garcia present or Councillor Craig-Devert. either. So I'm not been contacted by them.
Okay, that will be noted. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Do members have anything to declare? Nope. Lovely.
Chair, just for the public record, obviously one of the objectors this evening speaking is your fellow Hackney Ward councillor, Councillor Margaret Gordon. So just for the public record.
Agenda item 3, to consider any proposal referred to the subcommittee by the council's monitoring officer, and none have been received.
That is correct, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Are committee members happy with the accuracy of the minutes of our last meeting? Oh, no, Councillor Potter?
Sorry, I'm really sorry. I just realised I should have said something in the declarations of interest. I think we probably all received an email from one of the objectors, and I'm sorry I forgot to forward it on to you, Gareth.
That's fine. I think we all have.
Has somebody forwarded it on then to Gareth?
Yeah, yes, yes, somebody picked that up.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Sorry to disturb.
No,
your
that's
item.
absolutely fine. Thank you. I'm going to sign these minutes. Are they agreed, committee? Because that's what we were.
Thank
Yep.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's move to agenda item 5, which is 9 Clifton Road, Hackney, and I will let the officer lead us. We've got Lawrence Quill. Okay, Lawrence, the floor is yours. Everyone ready? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So this application relates to 9 Clifton Road, and the proposal relates to the conversion of a small HMO, 6-bedroom, into a large HMO of 7 bedrooms. Here's the site location plan for the site, which is located on the northern side of Clifton Road. The site is not located within a conservation area or has any designated heritage assets on the site. Here's some aerial views of the property in question. It's located on a residential street, a traditional residential street within Hackney. Here's some site photos of the front of the building, showing the front where refuse could be stored, and also showing on the left-hand side where a recent application for a mansard roof was granted and has subsequently been built out. There was a previous application at the site which was reviewed by the council, and this was for a similar proposal involving the conversion of the property when it was a single family dwelling house to a 7-bedroom HMO. This went to appeal, but was dismissed on the grounds that it had not been demonstrated that the proposed rent levels would be suitable for people with low incomes, and it would fail to encourage sustainable modes of transport with regard to parking provision. In order to overcome those reasons for refusal, this application will be subject to a Section 106 agreement to ensure that the additional bedroom, or occupiers of the additional bedroom as part of the proposal, would be subject to low rent levels and also restricted from obtaining on-street car parking permits. It's important to know, as part of that appeal decision, the council were awarded costs partially against them in relation to the refusal of the application on the principle of the change of use, because it hadn't, the authority hadn't reasonably demonstrated that permitted development rights had been taken into consideration in the planning balance and the fallback position. And here is just a snippet of the comments that were provided by the appeal inspector, who understood that it was resulting in the loss of family housing, but given permitted development rights, this change could have happened either way, and it needs to be given sufficient weight in the assessment. The difference between the previous application and the current application is now that the property has been converted into a HMO, but a small HMO, so it would no longer result in the loss of the single family dwelling house. Here are the existing proposed, just the proposed elevations of the front and the rear, and the side elevation. So these extensions were previously granted permission, have been built out. Here is the existing floor plans on the ground and first floor. The changes proposed would relate to the communal area at the rear of the ground floor element. Here's a bedroom and kitchen in the loft space. So here are the proposed ground floor plans where the communal area at the back would effectively be subdivided via a partition wall to create a additional bedroom facing out onto the light well. And the loft plans wouldn't change. So to summarise, the proposal would provide provisional additional HMO accommodation of good quality in a sustainable location. The increase in the number of occupiers would not materially compromise residential amenity more so than the lawful use of the site as a small HMO. And the additional occupancy would be subject to a rent cap and parking permit restriction as part of the Section 106 agreement, overcoming the previous reasons for refusal. Thank you.
We'll have the objectors next. Now, as we've got Councillor Gordon brings 5 minutes to speak, and so it's back, yeah, you've got 5 minutes as well. Yeah?
Stephanie's going first.
Yep, great. And we've got the traffic lights, and I'll give you a shout out when you've got 1 minute left, yeah? So when you're ready, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, chairs, councillor and officers. My name is Stephanie Baquet and I live at 11 Clifton Road, directly next door to 9 Clifton Road. I want to make it clear at the start that I'm not opposed to providing homes for people in Hackney, but I'm asking you today to refuse the proposal before you for the following reasons. Firstly, the quality of accommodation. The proposed layout squeezes 7 separate households into what used to be a 3-bedroom family house. All the rooms are small. There is no sufficient sound insulation in between the room, which consequently brings very little intimacy to residents and has led to conflict, one of which was a criminal incident in which the police were involved. The report said that the front door by itself is not a planning issue, but it's very old and thin and slants all day and all night. It remained broken for 2 weeks. One of the residents told me that his room felt like a prison cell, the kitchen was filthy, and it was very hot in the summer. Another resident with complex mental health issues used his bedroom as a toilet for months. To me, this does not qualify a high-quality accommodation, even if all the minimum legal planning requirements are in place. Secondly, the impact on neighbours' amenity. From the beginning, the management of the small HMO has been of very low standard. I understand that the local planning authority cannot be prejudiced against development proposals on the premise that antisocial behavior may not or may occur. However, the management track record in this instance, and with only 5 occupants, has already been very poor. Vulnerable individuals were housed together with absolutely no consideration towards their level of needs. One person had complex needs with addictions. A second was an asylum seeker with no English at all. Another was an 18-year-old man with ASD. And lastly was a man, his wife, and 2 very young children. We all have a duty of care towards vulnerable people, but this particular setting only makes the existing problem worse. The landlord has not taken any responsibility for the well-being of those living in the property. The situation meant that I, alongside with the police and emergency services, supervised the building. This doesn't make anyone feel safe. The resident, myself as a single mother with a vulnerable child, or the wider neighborhood. Although I'm aware that failure to complain with any license condition may result in fine and loss of license, it's a long process. And considering all events so far, I have reasons to expect that the regulation will not be enforced. Furthermore, waste storage and refuse management has always been a concern, which I logged to with the council. Thirdly, highways and parking pressure. I understand that every tenant can have a bike. There is no space at the front of the house to store 7 bikes, so instead the bikes will have to be stored in the garden. To get to the garden from the front door, the bikes will need to be pushed down a narrow hallway, through a fire door and into the living area. They will then have to navigate around sofas and chairs before going through the kitchen and dining area. This is highly impractical. Even with fewer occupants in the building, there is already an e-bike stored in the corridor, which is a fire hazard. Hackney Locals plans seek to create balanced and sustainable communities. There are around 600 large HMO. Adding another one, even if it means only one more occupier, risk undermining the mixed community character that the policy is designed to protect, and also creates a domino effect. To conclude, this proposal will create substandard living conditions, intensify antisocial activity in a way that harms neighbors and unbalance the local community. Because of all that has happened in the last 6 months, I have serious concern that the owners of the property will not provide caring, adequate and professional supervision and management. Prevention is key to avoid serious social and criminal issues. Therefore, I respectfully urge you to refuse this application. Thank you for listening this evening.
Thank you, Katani. Lovely. Councillor Gordon, ready for your 5 minutes? And if you could turn off your microphone, thank you. Respect you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here as a long-standing Lea Bridge Ward councillor to support residents objecting to this application. It's no coincidence that there are 2 very similar applications concerning the conversion of family homes into large HMOs being considered here tonight. And these properties are in a very short distance from each other. In the same area of Lea Bridge. As ward councillors, we've had to support residents with a significant number of issues arising out of antisocial behaviour, noise, waste disposal, and as Stephanie's described, even serious criminality arising from unsuitably developed and managed HMOs in this area of the ward. This had a significant negative cumulative impact on residents' quality of life in a way that is, as Stephanie said, impacting community cohesion. And I'm very concerned that this situation is going to continue and escalate. It's only down to the tenacity and determination of residents here tonight these applications have been brought to the planning subcommittee for full public consideration. I'd ask you to listen very, very carefully and take into account everything that's been said. Clifton Road is a residential street in the heart of Clapton, off Chatsworth Road, and part of the street borders Homerton Hospital. The section of the street where number 9 is situated consists of large late Victorian terraced houses. The area is one of single-family dwellings and residential conversions, as well as properties that are used by the health service. As has been outlined, an application for planning permission for a 7-bedroom HMO has previously been refused. Development was refused on 3 grounds, namely that result in undersupply of family dwellings, lack of detail on rent levels, and on the basis that it would promote the use of non-sustainable modes of transport. Those objections, in my opinion, still stand. Regularising this application would reward the behaviour of the landlord in proceeding without planning permission. While good quality houses and multi-occupation are rightly an important part of Hackney's development plan, this is not what this application, if granted tonight, will provide. The development proposal does not meet the criteria listed in LP 22. In particular, the first criteria stipulates that conversion does not exist to the loss of existing housing suitable for family use. The most recent lawful use of this property was a single dwelling. Previous application for conversion was refused. It cannot be right. Substantially similar application should now be granted after the works have already been done, and granting this tonight will give a green light to other developers. Moreover, I would submit the apparent reasoning in paragraph 6.3.3 that as the property can be lawfully converted to a 6-bed HMO without a change, without any change of use, due consideration is not needed to all the criteria set out in LP 22. And I consider that reasoning to be seriously flawed. In terms of loss of amenity, as this is a retrospective application, there is compelling evidence the existence of this change of use has significant impact to the loss of amenity. No evidence has been submitted on rent levels. I submit that despite the proposed informative, this is also a reason for refusing the application. In relation to the fifth criteria in LP 22, this rightly requires high standards for accommodation of this type in terms of space standards, management requirements, facilities and refuge arrangements. Focusing on management requirements, you've heard the account by Stephanie of her experiences, and it's very difficult to have confidence the management of the property licensed or unlicensed will provide the safety and security that tenants or their neighbours deserve. Access and transport to the site, as you've also heard, does not provide adequate cycle parking for a seven-bedroom property and their transport needs. For all these reasons, as well as the reasons that Stephanie has so eloquently set out, I would ask you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the agent for the applicant, Josh Myers. You have 10 minutes, so the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address the committee this evening. My name is Josh Myers of EA Town Planning, and we act on behalf of the applicant. This application seeks permission for the change of use of the property from a 6-bedroom HMO in Class C4 use to a 7-bedroom HMO in sui generis use. As set out in the committee report and confirmed by the council's planning officer, the proposal has been fully assessed against Hackney's adopted planning policies and found to be compliant and acceptable. The application has been brought to committee because 22 objections were received, including one from the Hackney Society. I'll explain how each of the key concerns has been addressed and why this modest proposal meets all policy requirements. Members will recall the site's recent planning history as detailed by the planning officer. This were 2 applications followed by a recent appeal. The appeal was dismissed for 2 reasons only: lack of secured affordable rent levels and no legal agreement to secure car-free occupation. There were no concerns about design, layout, or amenity. Since then, all of those issues have been resolved. First, a signed Section 106 agreement will be conditioned, securing the rent of the additional room at local housing allowance levels, ensuring affordability for low-income occupiers. Also, the same Section 106 will secure a car-free obligation, preventing the occupants from obtaining an on-street parking permit. Accordingly, none of the previous reasons for refusal now apply, and officers now recommend approval. The officer concludes in his report, the proposed change of use from a small HMO to a large HMO is acceptable in policy terms and would provide high-quality accommodation for future occupiers in accordance with policy LP 22 of the local plan. The site lies in a highly sustainable location, PTAL 5 rating, within a short walk of Hackney Central Major Town Centre and Chatsworth Road local shopping centre, giving excellent access to jobs, shops and public transport. HMO provides 7 high-quality ensuite bedrooms, each exceeding Hackney's minimum space and licensing standards, all windows providing adequate daylight and ventilation. The layout includes 2 fully equipped kitchens, one on the ground floor, which includes dining facilities, and one in the loft. While the ground floor communal area has been reduced from 35 square meters to 18 square meters to form the additional room, it still significantly exceeds the council's minimum kitchen dining requirements of 11.5 square meters, and officers confirm the arrangement remains adequate for 7 occupiers. Hackney's property licensing team has confirmed that the property would meet their requirements for a license for up to 7 households and 9 persons, and they raise no objection. We acknowledge the need to ensure the proposal causes no significant harm to neighbouring amenity, including overshadowing, loss of light, outlook, overlooking, or noise. Because there are no external alterations, the proposal results in no loss of amenity beyond existing circumstances. The officer report confirms the proposal would result in undue harm. The proposal would not result in undue harm to neighbouring occupiers in terms of overlooking, outlook, daylight, or sunlight. Adding 1 extra bedroom represents a negligible increase in potential noise or activity, and the property remains subject to the council's HMO licensing controls, which manage occupancy, behaviour and standards. Following consultation, refuse arrangements have been upgraded in direct response to the waste management team's comments. The front garden now accommodates 4 180-litre wheeled bins, plus additional space for food waste and recycling sacks. This fully meets the council's refuse storage standards and has been confirmed acceptable by Waste Management. In addition, secure cycle parking will be provided in accordance with policy LP42. The officer recommends that this can be secured by a condition. I'd like to acknowledge the 22 objections received, including one from the Hackney Society. Many comments raised relate to matters outside the scope of planning policy, such as the appearance of the front door, fears about crime or antisocial behaviour, or suggestions that tenants may have complex personal circumstances. While we understand and sympathise with these concerns, such matters are governed through licensing and management, not through the planning system. We also recognise that there have been some historic complaints associated with the existing HMO. However, this application is not about whether the HMO should exist at all. It already does lawfully and with an active licence. It is simply about whether one additional bedroom can be permitted within that lawful use. And with regards to that question, officers are clear. The change results in no external alterations, no additional loss of amenity to neighbours, no parking impacts due to the car-free agreement, and improved management and compliance through licensing and legal controls. So while we acknowledge residents' frustrations, the planning assessment must focus on policy impact, and on that basis, the proposal is fully compliant. To summarise, the property already lawfully operates as a 6-bedroom HMO with a licence granted in March 2024. This proposal introduces 1 bedroom only, a very modest intensification within the same building envelope. Previous reasons for refusal, family housing loss, rent affordability, and car-free status are all resolved through the lawful fallback and the conditioned Section 106 agreement. The scheme provides good quality ensuite rooms, adequate communal and refuse space, and complies with all relevant Hackney local plan and London plan policies. Chairs and members, this proposal simply makes efficient use of existing housing as one affordable bed space and has no material adverse impacts on the community or neighbours. I therefore respectfully invite the committee to support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move over to the committee's questions. I saw Councillor Potter first.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come to the applicant. So I've got 2 questions for you. So I appreciate what you said about the appeal, and obviously the case, the council case planning officer also laid out. It's quite clear in the documentation. But it kind of troubles me slightly that you're going to have 1 room, 1 household that's going to have a rent cap, and the rest are going to be charged a higher rate. That seems to me to must contravene some policies of ours in terms of equity. So I just wondered whether you would be able to comment on that and how that is going to work with those residents, particularly as we've already heard from, you know, the residents in that street, that you've already got a conflict of interest in the way that some residents have engaged with each other. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a good setup. And the same in terms of the, you know, the car and free aspect just for that particular household. The other question I wanted to ask is, why is this retrospective? You obviously have applied for planning, you've had it refused before. Why have you carried out work? I might be told this is not material, but I do think it gives us an idea of the way that, you know, you might approach things. You obviously had it refused before, so I go ahead with the works to get that 7th bedroom. We've already heard from residents that the management, they are concerned about the management, so I'd like to hear more reassurance from you as an applicant of how you're going to manage and address these things, given, you know, you perhaps don't appear to approach things in a transparent way so far.
I appreciate the concerns about the proposed HMO and the ways it's been suggested that the applications have gone forward. I must point out that the applicant is simply making use of a acceptable planning policy within Hackney Council planning policy guidance that it is permitted development for a household to be converted into an HMO up to 6 bedrooms. The councils can have issues and questions on that policy, but that policy is in existence, and has been utilized in this development. This proposal is really just focusing on this one additional bedroom. The HMO, the 6-bedroom current HMO is not technically, is not at all addressed in this application. We're just dealing with this one additional bedroom. Obviously, the HMO is a registered HMO, and as a registered HMO, it will have to very clearly and strictly comply with all policy. And that policy, the HMO guidance is there to ensure that HMOs are serving functionally. However, this application is only to be viewed as a change of use from an existing 6-bedroom HMO to a 7-bedroom HMO, and that's why the Section 106s are only legally and only able to be focused on that one additional bedroom.
Can I ask a follow on to officers? In terms of the equity principle, in terms of one of the rooms having a rent cap and the others not, and in terms of one of the rooms, the same room being car free, how does this line in with our with our council policies? It doesn't seem to create a good circumstance to me for those residents living together.
Yeah, I appreciate that there is a bit of an issue in terms of equity there. I suppose in reality, the people that are living in the property wouldn't necessarily know how much each individual person is paying rent-wise. So I'm not sure how that would actually arise as an issue. But from a planning policy perspective, we have to consider the lawful fallback position of what's already there. So it would be unreasonable to impose restrictions and conditions on existing development. And we can, as the agents already said, that we can only focus on what actually requires planning permission. In this instance, it is just the increase from 6 bedrooms to 7 bedrooms. So that one additional room is the only element that we can capture reasonably in terms of restricting on-street car parking permits being applied for and rent cap. The rest, it would be potentially imposing restrictions on existing occupiers, which is not generally considered reasonable, even if there is if it does end up in a certain level of inequality in terms of rents between between the occupiers throughout the unit, and also it's up for the existing occupiers. It's up for the landlord to determine what those rents are generally. So in theory, they could charge rent on the different kind of sizes of rooms, or on different grounds they can probably charge rent. So I wouldn't imagine that there would be just a blanket rent for all the occupiers within that building. So it'd be difficult to kind of raise the argument of inequality between the different rooms and different occupiers. But yeah, in planning policy terms, it's not something that we can consider.
Councillor Narcross next.
Thank you. So mine's slightly a follow-up to Councillor Potter's question. So on the enforcement aspect of this, so you said there's a change of use to a 7-bedroom HMO enforcement case currently open on the property. So is that because the change to a 7-bedroom HMO has already occurred, or you believe it's already occurred?
That is, as far as I'm aware, that the enforcement investigation is open because that has what the complaint that has been received is in relation to, not because it's actually been carried out. Maybe the agent might be able to clarify, but yeah, we're assessing effectively the lawful position of a 6-bedroom HMO to a 7-bedroom HMO. So that is the element that requires permission. So the enforcement investigation, if this application were to be refused and it was found that it was operating as a 7-bedroom HMO without planning permission, then enforcement action could be taken.
Right. So is it operating as a 7-bedroom HMO?
Sorry?
So is it operating as a 7-bedroom?
No, as far as I'm aware, there's been building at the site to implement the lawful extensions which have been approved, and also to begin the process of changing it to a 6-bedroom HMO, which again is a lawful change of use. I don't believe that the seventh bedroom has been added yet. This will be subject to approval at the committee.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, I had another question. So this point about the kind of fallback position and the planning inspectorate and the lawful permitted development to turn into a 6-bedroom HMO. If we approve this application on that basis, then are we effectively conceding that any property in Hackney can be turned into a 6-bedroom HMO under permitted development? So we should automatically, therefore, in perpetuity, grant 7-bedroom HMOs because that fallback position is actually not a residential dwelling. That fallback position is a 6-bedroom HMO. And does that set a dangerous precedent?
I mean, we'd have to review any application that comes to us on a case-by-case basis. But in theory, as there are no restrictions across Hackney borough-wide in terms of permitted development rights to change from a single-family dwelling house to a HMO, that could reasonably be used as an argument to back up the justification in the principle of a change of use, across the borough.
Councillor Susirunga?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question to the officers. Where you are saying that going from 6 to 7 bedrooms, this would involve the subdivision of ground floor communal living space to create an additional bedroom. How can we be assured that, or can we be assured that the actual communal living space criteria is not compromised by doing this? And what would be the materials that you're using for the subdivision, for the actual physical subdivision?
In terms of ensuring that the communal area is not used, we would be granting permission on the basis of the approved plans, and the permission would be governed by the approved plans, which has demarcated the communal area in the bedroom. So if they were to then use that as something other than a communal area, then they would be in breach of condition and enforcement action could be taken. In terms of the materials used, it would, whether or not it would need to comply with building regulations, I'm not sure, because it's a new partition wall. It's not something that it impacts the external appearance of the building, so it's not something that in planning terms would be a material consideration. And maybe the agent can highlight what those materials might be, but it's not something that we can really comment on.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about the person who's living or who is occupying that room now, whether there was a noise issue or a privacy issue, just going down that. I know that's not a particular issue for you, but maybe you could mention if someone is living in that space, is there a privacy issue because you're close to a communal area? Is there an issue with noise? I mean, it's not necessarily a material condition, but would be nice to hear what you have to say about that.
I appreciate your question. Building regulations do require walls separating bedrooms from communal spaces to be sufficiently acoustically insulated. So the applicant obviously has every intentions to follow building regulations, in which case the bedroom should be acoustically insulated.
Thanks, Chair. This is a question for officers. I'm just trying to make sense of well, it's a combination of points, but the primary point is around the precedent value of a decision to approve this application this evening, in combination with the point that we heard from the inspector around the fallback being the switch to a 6-person is going to happen anyway, so you measure the impact on amenity against a 6-person HMO and not the family home. And I know that precedent isn't a material planning consideration per se. It's not something we should take into account in making the decision on this. But I would be interested to know, with that point in mind, how is the planning process or other processes at the council's disposal used to ensure community balance, which is mandated under the London plan and the local plans, if we're limited purely in the case of HMO application, large HMO applications, to considering the immediate application before us, which seems to be restricting us from taking into account any consideration of community balance. You know, how do we avoid an over-concentration of HMOs in an area if we can only take into account this particular application? And if that's not the planning process, what is it? How is that, which is set out in the plan, achieved in practice?
So basically, yeah, as you know, there was the planning inspector's decision, which is a material consideration in terms of this application, and also the fact that the site circumstances have changed in this particular application where the property has been converted into a HMO. So the consideration of the loss of a single family dwelling is kind of no longer present because it's no longer a single family dwelling. In terms of the impact that this has borough-wide, obviously we're implementing the development plan and all material considerations that are relevant. It could happen across the borough, and as I say, the same arguments could probably put to any dwelling within the borough. And there is, I know some other boroughs have put in Article 4 directions to have blanket restrictions on the conversion of property, single-family dwellings into small HMOs, but that's not the case currently in Hackney. And yeah, all we can do as a local authority is implement the development plan as it's currently adopted until any other changes have material effects on that.
Do you want to come back on that one, Councillor Smith? Then we'll go to Councillor Potter, thank you.
I was just wondering whether we could bring the resident in who wanted to speak to what we've heard so far. Is that okay? Is that permitted, Chair?
Well, not really, is what I'm going to say, because it's not someone that we've got listed for this item, and it's not a public meeting. But if you know the point that you said, then please do try and summarise them. Or do you know what it is? I'm talking to the people that are registered.
I suppose they actually partnerships and look at how long the expectation is.
Okay, look, okay. How long has it been established?
Yeah, and officers advise on whether that's correct, but, you know, if it's only been 2 months, is that relevant? Because the point of comparison still is
No, it's not relevant. They could convert it. Any property could be converted to a HMO for 1 day. It's not lawful via the passage of time. It's lawful because of the legislation, which allows them to. They can change from a HMO back to a single family dwelling and vice versa as many times as they want, for as long as they want. That's the legislation. It's not bound by time.
Who was next? Councillor Tadeka.
Sorry, I'm pressing this a little bit more. So are we saying then in the case of any household, any house that is capable of becoming a large HMO should be, for the purposes of this comparison and these considerations around loss of amenity, should just be taken as a 6-person HMO? Doesn't that render the question of considering the loss of family homes redundant?
Yeah, slightly. But as I say, it is on a case-by-case basis. We would have to consider it. As I've highlighted in this situation, the previous appeal decision, although it was dismissed, the council were awarded costs partially against us on that basis. So if we were going to refuse the principal across the borough in a similar fashion, then we'd be at risk of having costs awarded against us every single time.
Can I follow up on that, please,
Yes, please,
Chair?
John.
I just need to remember, members, that the fallback position and the concerns of precedent solely relates to the land use principle. So there are further considerations that need to be made, including standard of accommodation, suitability of the proposed accommodation, And of course, matters outside of planning's control, such as HMO licensing, that would then dictate whether the property would be suitable for HMO use or not.
Councillor Potter? So I think it's just to follow on really and say, as part of the 3 reasons given for rejection previously, one of them was about, family home. So I don't quite get it why that was down there if that's not something that could be applied. Did you?
Yeah, so we, as a local authority, refused on those 3 grounds. That went to appeal. As part of the appeal decision, only 2 of those grounds were effectively upheld. The one that was not upheld was the principle of the change of use. So that would no longer be considered as a reasonable ground to refuse the application. And that was on the basis that previously it was a house turning into a HMO. Now it's a small HMO turning into a large HMO. So that reason for refusal has effectively diminished even further. So, yeah.
So, sorry, Chair, just one very tiny question. So just to remind me, and I'm sorry, I've probably been told this before, and you've probably said in this meeting even, so small to large, basically small is up to 6 and large is 7 and above rooms. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's to do with the occupancy levels rather than the actual number of rooms. So it's 6 people. Up to 6 people is a small HMO. Any more than 6 people is considered a large HMO.
Councillor Narcos?
Sorry, so just to follow up on that, so up to 6 people is a small HMO, which is what it can be turned into without us having to consider it. So this, I think it says this would be 9 people, so we're effectively adding 3 additional people in terms of occupants. Is that correct?
That's potentially the case for the purposes of HMO licensing, but what the planning application is applying for is for a 7-person HMO.
For 7-person, okay.
So they would have to effectively comply with the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. So yeah, sorry, I had a couple of other questions as well. So one of them was around the quality of accommodation. So obviously, it says in the report the bedrooms and all of the rooms meet minimum standards. But that subdivision of that kind of ground floor kind of communal space to create the 7th bedroom does significantly reduce that communal space in the property. Obviously there is I think that is also above the minimum size. There is a second kitchen on the 2nd floor, but I think it's also noted that that has quite a low headroom. So my question is kind of really, are we really achieving kind of high quality accommodation as we, require by LP 22 with this application, or is it really just, meeting minimum standards to kind of maximize occupancy on the site?
Yeah, I suppose whether or not it's high quality accommodation is a matter of judgment. We consider it to be of a sufficient level of quality accommodation for the purposes of assessing the proposal. We have liaised with our licensing colleagues who have said that they would grant a license on the basis of what is shown. So in terms of the policy grounds to refuse it on the standard of accommodation, I believe would be quite difficult.
So just a question on the rent cap line. So it was the previous application, the rent cap of the rent levels and the parking was part of the reason why it's rejected. This under section 106 proposes a rent cap for the additional bedroom. I've not seen that in an application that's come to us before, I don't think. Can you explain how that works and how that will be monitored and enforced in practice? How would the council know that the landlord is charging kind of LHA levels of rent for this room? And yeah, so you covered the other point, sorry. Yeah, so that's my question. How will we know and how is that going to be enforced?
So also be a monitoring process as part of that. So I don't know the exact wording of what the clauses would be at this stage, but we would effectively ask for evidence when they commence the development and rent out the development that they are charging rates in association with the local housing allowance. which is calculated on benefits for particular areas and is liable to change over time. So it's quite flexible, but also helps ensure that that rents would remain low over time, and not just at the time of determining the application. So yeah, there would be adequately worded clause within the Section 106 to make sure that they are legally obliged to provide evidence that that this additional room complies.
Councillor Sadek first.
Just as a follow on to that point, is that obligation indefinite, or is it? Yeah, okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then I had another question, if that's okay. Yeah. So, having listened to what the objector explained to us about some of the difficulties that she and other neighbours have experienced around antisocial behaviour, noise, waste disposal, potential criminal activities. Again, it's about how far we can take this into account in our decision. And I know that we've been guided that the focus should be on land use and design considerations and so on. But the management of a HMO, as far as I'm aware, if that can lead to harm of the sort described by the objector, it becomes a relevant planning consideration that we are able to take into account. So I'd like confirmation from officers that that's the case, and then also just your whether in considering and making the recommendations that you've made on this application, how far you've explored those concerns, complaints, what's been done about them, have you taken them into account in making this decision, and would welcome comments from the representative of the applicant as well in relation to that and the management record of the landlord.
In terms of the issues that have happened historically at the property, it's difficult for us to prejudice future development on what's happened in the past. In effect, antisocial behaviour can arise at any property, regardless if it's a HMO or a house. Obviously, in this instance, we have obviously read the objections and heard the testimonies from the neighbouring residents of the issues that have happened before. As far as I'm aware, they're no longer residing at the property. So whether or not that is a basis of the general HMO management being required as part of the HMO license, or whether or not it's just something else has changed in that whole time period, or if it's because extensions have taken place and people have had to move out, I'm not sure. But yeah, from our perspective, it's difficult to, with 100% certainty, say that a HMO is going to result in antisocial behaviour any more so than any other type of residential accommodation. We just can't prejudice against proposals on those grounds. Yeah, and there are things in place in terms of the HMO licensing regime that allows the local authority to take action when these things do arise. So yeah, the appropriate things would be in place to help prevent that from taking place in the future if it were to start up again.
I just want to say that, you know, we were, the community, myself and neighbors, the ones who supervised when all the problems happened. So imagine if I hadn't called the police this morning to say that one of the residents was not going to be stabbed, what would have happened to the guy who had also mental health issues? Maybe he would be dead. Imagine if I didn't phone over and over the police or the ambulance to say that Mikey was in danger. I could have said, well, you know what? I don't care. It is not my problem. The planning permission said it's all okay. The insulation is amazing. Even if I spend £2,500 insulating the walls of all my bedrooms, and yet I'm sleeping in the living room. But, you know, imagine if I didn't care. Imagine if I said, this is the way it is, I'm afraid. There's nothing I can do about it. Maybe Mikey would have been dead. And, you know, there's been so many people at this door. There's been somebody coming from the borough of Islington changing the locks with a bulletproof jacket one morning in front of my daughter. And I said, what's going on? No, I've got to change the locks. And then the day after, it was someone else who came to fix the door because it was broken for 2 weeks. I've never seen you, sir, at the property, not once. Also, my walls are damaged by the work, the building work. You know, I mean, and then now it's like, well, you want to make it bigger, then yeah, just make it bigger and, you know, because that's the way it is. No, we all have a duty of care for our community. I don't mind supervising from time to time if I have to, but I need to be in touch with you. I need you to be reactive. I phoned the Borough of Islington because most of them came from the Borough of Islington. I met all the social workers. I gave them water, tea.
Well,
sorry.
You are repeating a
Thank you
point
for
that you've
letting me
made,
speak.
which is, you know, and you've made it very clear. Is there anything you want to talk about in terms of management of your tenants?
Just to introduce myself, I'm the planning agent for the application. I'm not involved in the day-to-day running at all of the HMO. That's my job. That's unfortunately that.
Okay.
I fully sympathise with your position, and I admire your courage in dealing with the issues that arise. However, from the planning perspective, this exists as an HMO, and this application is just to add that one extra bedroom, and we've established that there is sufficient room and sufficient accommodation space on the site to accommodate that extra bedroom.
It's not, can we stop, please? Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are to the officers. It does seem quite odd that as we move from a small HMO to a large HMO, that we can reduce the communal living area as drastically as we are doing by this. Obviously, I'm assuming we must be within the space guidelines for a large HMO, but I just wonder if those are adequate, because if we're going to have 9 people living in this house, it does seem to me that we're looking at a very small area. I am very concerned about the bicycles coming through that area. I can imagine it being a fire risk, because I can imagine that quite often the bicycles may well not even get as far as the outside space in the garden. And the other thing I'm concerned about is on the assessment 6.3.13, it says, in terms of outlook and daylight, each of the bedrooms will be served by good-sized windows, which would provide an adequate outlet look, free from any material sense of enclosure, and would receive adequate daylight. I wonder how we've assessed that, because as I see these plans, we've got a window which doesn't look particularly large, which is looking out into a well, which has no real outlook. It's also, since the roof has gone up, it's the south-facing bit of it is 3-storey. So we're looking at something which is really very restricted in terms of daylight for this new bedroom. And I suppose I'm particularly concerned, given what I've heard about the mental health of some of the occupants, that the amount of daylight that this room is going to actually provide is really tiny.
Yes, I mean, the bedroom in question, there is an existing window there, and it does form part of the existing accommodation. Obviously, that would be changing to be a bedroom, but future occupiers of that bedroom would also have the ability to use the communal spaces, so they wouldn't be solely reliant on just outlook and daylight from that window. It would be, they'd have free movement between the rest of the communal areas. So in the round, it's considered to be satisfactory.
Really? I mean, what would be unsatisfactory in these circumstances? Seems to me that if that's satisfactory, we've really got to look at these regulations, because it's just not.
Yeah, I mean, it is a matter of judgment at the end of the day. As I say, our licensing colleagues have also reviewed it in relation to their ways of assessing these matters, and they consider it to be acceptable as well. So, yeah, it's in terms of just the assessment, it's in the, as I say, in the round, it's considered to be acceptable, and also it's important to note that I suppose that this wasn't raised as an issue as part of the previous appeal decision in terms of the standard of accommodation.
Councillor Potter.
Mine was just following on from Councillor Depp in terms of the management. So this is for Josh. I know you say you're the agent and you're here just to talk about specific things, and you obviously haven't been briefed about talking about the management side of things. And obviously that's something that we're always very concerned, but we're always very concerned about. So this is good knowledge for you. So I suppose we just want you to take the message back that it would have been really useful for us to know, you know, the management system that's in place. I know that licensing are going to, you know, the licensing side of things will actually deal with that. It's also useful for the residents that are here to know how they're able to contact. And often we do ask these questions in planning, even if we're told they're not material. So I just wanted to point that out, that please, in the future, make sure that if you're similar cases that you have that information, and can you pass that back on to the owner, you know, that the residents need a very clear, direct line of communication.
Councillor Desmond.
We're talking about one more room, but it obviously is creating a great deal of controversy. What I wanted to know from you, because you've spoken very eloquently, I just wish we had such eloquence coming from the councillors in some of the meetings we have to attend, but no matter, I shouldn't go there in a minute. Have you actually complained? Because it's very sad what you've had to, you know, put up with, and I'm very sympathetic to people who are vulnerable, people who have mental health. I was going to say Arsenal supporters, but I'm not that sympathetic, being the other side of the coin with North London. But have you actually complained to the licensing authority about these very unfortunate and unpleasant scenes that you yourself have had to intervene in? Because these are things that they should take with license. And if they refuse a license, even of a small HMO, it is a very different kettle of fish. So have you actually complained to the licensing, which is under the private sector housing part of the environmental services?
Thank you for the compliments. I'm kind of all new to the process. I've been very kindly helped by Eva, who is here, and Margaret. And I wrote loads of letters to all different departments, I started with Jonathan Benbridge, and then, yes, I tried. I think most departments I could sort of reach out in a way that but it's a learning process. I also contacted Islington because I knew some of the residents were from Islington. At first they said that had nothing to do with them. It wasn't on their list. Then I phoned back and they said that yes, the residents were with them. I spoke to the social workers because also I was concerned for myself, but also for the residents. I talked to the police. I had to be a witness in a court case because one of the guys tried to stab one of the residents. So I spoke to the police. I spoke to my witness officer. You know, so yes, I mean, it's a working process, and I am all open to learn and to send lots of letters, but it's also, as you probably know, very time consuming. I also spoke to to the school because my daughter is adopted, so she's a vulnerable child. I wanted to flag it with the school as well because I wanted basically everybody to know that there was all of this happening next door. So yeah, I think, you know, yeah, and I will reach the license, but I think from what I learned, to change a license or to challenge a license, it's actually a huge job. I went to estate agents as well. I asked them how to challenge licenses, and they say you have to record noise, you have to make pictures, you have to do, you know, it's a long process. And I was busy trying to, you know, sleep through the night while the resident was screaming all night long, or calling the police, or, you know. And I ordered the bins, yeah, the bins, you know, the 3 bins, and I told all the tenants how to recycle because there was garbage everywhere. I asked everybody, I showed them how to use the green bags, the little blue bin, you know, and I ordered 1 more bin. So, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can certainly help with guiding you and pointing you in the right direction as to which authorities to contact. We can get in touch with you after this, if relevant. What HMO licensing can do is take the behaviour of managements and how the property operates into account when considering their license, unlike planning. So we'll be happy to point you in the direction if you need further advice from the HMO licensing team. Okay.
Councillor Rich. I'd just like to put it on record, really, that I think that HMOs like this are designed primarily in the current market to be targeted at our most vulnerable residents, often people who are being housed in emergency circumstances. And I do think that, I really do think that this bedroom is inadequate for people who are in a vulnerable living situation. And I can't see any way that we should be giving permission to this as a large HMO when one of those rooms is, I think, not fit for habitation for vulnerable people. I think it would be wrong.
Any other questions? Okay, I've got a couple of points. I think it is a really key concern for us as the planning committee that our policy, which is to stop HMOs if it is at the expense of a family house, right? That's our policy. And yet it seems to have been said that that counts for nothing. And there's a wheeze that because of the law says it's absolutely legal that a house can be turned into an HMO for 6 people under permitted development. Now, that's a fact, and we've got a policy, and I think our policy is a fact, and they stand side by side. I think I absolutely understand our planners, and they have to look at what happened at the appeal and the guidance. And what I would say is that if you go and see other appeals, you'll get a different opinion because it'll be a different judge with a different view, and it will be argued differently. This is not the law. This is an operative statement. All right. So let's take that into consideration. This is how I feel, that this is in direct breach. And I think it's a bit disingenuous. You've got to look at the whole purpose of the policy and the law. Yeah. And this clearly has been a house that was for a family occupation that has been turned into an HMO. So we are tweaking around the differences of adding an additional bedroom. And I've got to say, I am really underwhelmed with these plans. And I think these plans are in breach of our policy because there is no amenity space. There isn't any. They've put a bedroom in the amenity space. They have a kitchen. I don't know how 7/9, and I get there's one at the top floor, 9 people, if you've got 2 people, at least a minimum of 7 people using that kitchen size, which may meet the minimum requirement, but I'm not sure when they said the minimum requirement, they thought that all the people there would have to eat in that room, sit down and eat in there, as well as that would be the, I mean, the kitchen is not an amenity space. If you look at the plans as it was, that looks like a communal living, a living space. There is no living space in this house. It's been taken away. And for those 2 reasons, one, I would like it reconsidered, that our policy needs to be defended, and this is the removal of a family home, and that there is no amenity space, which is against our policy, which says that provide rooms and communal spaces of a high quality and adequate size, ending and amenity space. That is not here, and I think it's against our policy. Right, any more comments? So, putting this to the vote. The recommendation summary is that we grant planning permission subject to conditions and the completion of a section 106 legal agreement. Those in favour, please show. Those against?
Just let me go and note it.
Let governance take a note.
Oh, yeah, hang on.
It's 5, including myself.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you, everybody.
Abstentions? Go do something.
Councillor
Susan Rongo, what are you doing? Are you abstaining?
Abstaining.
Which way are you voting? Okay. Right. Shall I do the vote again?
Yeah, right, yeah.
The recommendation is to grant, it's the grant planning permission as recommended, as set out, as we were, subject to the conditions and the completion of a section 106 legal agreement. Those in favour? There are none. I move to those against the recommendation.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, let's say that's against.
right,
And my
okay.
apologies. So that's 6.
Yeah.
Abstentions, 1. Now, I understand that there's a certain procedural aspect now in that we have to make a recommendation in the alternative.
Correct. And one member of the panel would need to put forward a second motion.
Right. Something like we reject, well, that would be the correct wording?
Correct, yeah.
We have to just go by inadequate amenity space. I think that is, as the chair indicated, with such an additional number, even though it is only one room, to live without any living room, I think is unacceptable. 6 is still pushing it, but that's under permitted development. So I think inadequate amenity space.
Okay. Is it? On those grounds, I'm tempted, we have nothing to lose here, Councillor Desmond, in the terms of the challenge, which is that we have a policy that says HMOs are not permitted if it takes away a family dwelling. You know what? It'd be okay if they had a great amenity space, or you thought that the quality of living in there was just above all, because there is no amenity space in this at all. I think that is a complete breach of our policy. Councillor Round.
Chair, can I just point out that the officer did point out, with regard to the window and the light coming in, that the resident in that bedroom would be able to get the light that they needed to presumably get their necessary vitamin D by using a communal space. But, if there is no communal space, or it's so negligible that it's barely there, then it seems to me that it makes that objection about the size of the window a material planning condition as well.
It comes into the high quality. I mean, the size may be there, but the quality of the rooms. Okay, do you think we can stick that together as an alternative that we, so Councillor Narcross, you were putting words there. Do you wish to move that? Yeah, fabulous. That it is a rejection on the grounds of, yeah, the breach of policy, the adequacy, yep, that they are not they're not communal spaces of high quality or adequate
We
size,
can
in
put
that the
forward,
fact that they don't exist.
We can put forward sort of some wording with respect to the reason for refusal. So on that basis, would require one of the councillors to put forward a second motion.
Yep.
So
we've got that, and seconded by, I'm going with Councillor Potter just because I saw you first. Do you need time to?
We need time, but you'd have to go back to the vote again to
support
that second
On the
motion.
alternative recommendation.
Yes.
So
I mean, do you want to work on the words and then come back and then read them out?
We would need to do that once
Okay.
you've done that.
Right, so this is like a 5-minute break while you,
If you take the vote first, and if that's
okay,
confirmed,
fair
we'll
enough.
then
vote on the recommendation.
vote on the
So this
recommendation.
is kind of like
then
when
we'll
you've
put the
amended
words.
the motion and then we support the amended motion. So we actually are supporting the alternative, which is that we reject this on the grounds, and the precise wording will be drawn up once we have confirmed the vote that we have declined this application, yeah? So those in favour of proposing an alternative, which is a,
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify with the policy, I was understood that the officers would draft the alternative motion first by leaving the room, then come back and then ask the councillors to vote. I think that's.
We're happy to do that as well, if that is the correct order.
Based on past precedent,
Okay.
based on what I'm reading here, which the legal officer has, and you have.
In
John.
which case I'm wrong and we'll go away.
Okay, I
And
think we should try and stick to what we've got here.
so is that a
Because you're-
5-minute break?
because essentially we voted on a motion.
Should we stay here
Read the word.
or should we
You want
take
the
a
word in the
couple,
room?
should we take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
We want it to include the
Alright.
window as well.
Sorry? Oh, the windows as well. Okay, you know what? Let's have a 5-minute break, yeah? Can we just stop it, have a break?
Okay, Monsieur, we're going to take a 5-minute break where we just agree on the motion, the alternative wording for the motion, okay? So I don't know if you want to throw up a screen on YouTube for the moment? Okay, thank you, Monsieur.
Okay, who are we waiting
Councillor
for?
Gordon.
It's Councillor Gordon coming back, and then when she sits down, we'll reconvene.
Monsieur, I believe everybody's back now in the room, so I think we're ready to carry on. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, are we ready to reconvene? And we'll have the alternative proposed wording from Johnson? No.
Yeah,
The officer.
I can read out. So the reason would be, by reason of the substandard quality of accommodation proposed, the proposed large HMO would be detrimental to the living conditions of future occupiers. The proposed development would therefore conflict with policies LP2 and LP22 of the Hackney Local.
That will do with me. Those in favour of that version, please. Sorry?
So does that imply that we think the amenity, do you not need to explain what particular quality of accommodation? Because obviously we were concerned about natural light and we were concerned about amenity. Do you not need to say that in the reason?
You don't have to be that specific in the reason. You can elaborate on the reason as part of, if an appeal comes forward, we can elaborate on what was discussed and the reasons why we considered that reason.
Yeah. I think we just want to be sure that it's clear that those are our reasons in terms of amenity.
I think perhaps the broader umbrella term gives freedom to list the many aspects we might want to list. And that will be taken by our officers. Yep. Okay. All right. Those in favour of that version, please show. Councillor.
That is unanimous in favour of the alternative motion. Correct.
Thank you very much. And with that, we've had our comfort break, so we will steam on into agenda item 6, 12 Burton Road. And we have a different case officer here. Hi, Christopher Code. Objecting. So we've got Councillor Gordon. Are you going to be doing 5 minutes? Yes. And Eva Rothschild, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah. And Schulenposen, yes, hello, from Ede Planning, you'll have 10 minutes. Okay, so with the officers first to give the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, councillors. Current application at 12 Blurton Road for the use of the property as a 9-bedroom large HMO with a mansard roof extension and the provision of refuse and cycle storage facilities. So the first slide just shows the site subject to the current application as outlined by the red line. The site relates to a 2-storey above lower ground floor level property located along the southern side of Blurton Road. So this slide just shows an aerial view image of the site and the wider row of terrace properties of which 12 Blurton Road forms part. As can be seen from the aerial view image, that properties 16 and 28 similarly have benefited from mansard roof extensions. The site isn't situated in a conservation area, nor is the building statutory or locally listed. Sorry. So this slide just shows 2 photographs taken from Blurton Road. The left photograph shows the front elevation of the existing property, taken from street level, with the visibility of the mansard roof extension being limited. And then the right-hand side photo is taken from the western end of Blurton Road, facing eastwards, with the parapet wall of mansard roof extension being more visible. So just touching on the planning history for the application site, In March of this year, a similar scheme was brought to this committee for the use of the property as a 10-bedroom large HMO, as well as the erection of a mansard roof extension. Officer's recommendation was overturned by members, whereby it was considered that the proposed development would result in substandard quality of accommodation, and there would be inadequate provision of cycle storage. Subsequently, the application was refused, with the absence of an associated legal agreement securing relevant obligations forming the third and fourth reasons for refusal. Following this decision, an application solely for the erection of a mansard roof extension was submitted for the consideration of the local planning authority. The proposed development was considered to be acceptable and was granted in May of this year. This permission is therefore live, which carries significant weight in the determination of the current application in relation to the mansard roof extension only. So just touching on the proposed mansard roof extension, here we have a proposed elevation and that which was approved under the previous application earlier this year. Just to confirm that the scale and form of the mansard roof extension proposed would correspond with that previously approved, which was deemed to be acceptable. So moving to the proposed floor plans, the floor plans show the 9-bedroom HMO internal layout. As a means to address the previous reason for refusal in relation to quality of accommodation and address members' concerns, the proposed occupation of the property has been reduced to 9 bedrooms, with a communal and kitchen and dining area provided at loft level. As such, not only has the property been reduced in occupancy, but an additional communal area is proposed, which will provide kitchen and dining facilities for occupiers of the upper floors. Each of the remaining bedrooms would have an acceptable internal headroom, level of outlook, and receive an acceptable level of natural daylight. Each bedroom would also be served by an ensuite shower room. This slide just shows some blow-up plans of the proposed communal kitchen and dining areas. The left image being at ground floor level, with the right-hand side image being at loft level. The proposed layouts show sufficient provision of sinks and draining boards, cookers and hobs, cupboard storage, and seating. Property licensing have been consulted on the proposal and consider the proposed kitchen facilities in both instances to be acceptable. Turning to the proposed refuse and recycling storage areas, the left-hand side image shows the proposed plan, as well as the right-hand side image showing a photograph of the existing arrangements of bin storage for properties along Blurton Road. As can be seen from the photograph, bins are currently presented onto the footway on days for collection, with bins otherwise stored in access ways or within the light wells where steps need to be navigated. The proposed bin storage arrangement would mean bins would be off the footway, minimising obstruction. Furthermore, the bin storage would be secured by condition to ensure that there is sufficient bin capacity for the property and it's kept free from obstruction other than for its intended use. As such, it's considered the proposed development would present an opportunity to improve the existing situation of refuse and recycling storage. Turning to the proposed cycle parking storage and access arrangements, following concerns raised by members, the proposed cycle store, whilst still remains to be installed to the rear of the property, wheeling ramps would be installed to the front and rear sets of steps to improve accessibility. This offering is considered to be acceptable given the constraints of the site and would contribute positively towards objectives promoting sustainable modes of transport. Again, precise details of the cycle store would be secured by condition to ensure adequate provision and to ensure the store is kept free from obstruction other than for its intended purpose. That concludes my presentation. The recommendation is to approve the proposed development subject to the recommended conditions and the completion of a legal agreement. The obligations sought would relate to securing current rent levels in line with local housing allowance and securing the development's car parking permit free for the additional bedrooms. Thank you.
You said you want to go? 5 minutes, yeah. On at the end.
Hello? Okay. Hi again, I'm Eva Rothschild, resident of Blurton Road, speaking on behalf of my neighbourhood to object to this. As you know, a previous application for a 10-room HMO on this site was unanimously rejected. Although the applicant has kindly added a second kitchen, This does not address the fundamental reasons the scheme remains unacceptable. The property is currently occupied by 6 people, plus a baby. This is okay. Moving to 9 adults represents a 50% increase in occupancy, inevitably generating far higher levels of comings and goings, noise, and refuse than a family home or even the small HMO. This crosses into a different use class, sui generis, which both the London Plan and Hackney's local plan seek to carefully control. Policies LP 12, 14 and 33, along with London Plan H9 and D6, aim to protect residential amenity and maintain a balanced housing mix. Our street already has too many large HMOs, which cause significant issues. There were 2 armed raids on our street in September in properties which are actually licensed. This proposal would intensify noise, refuse and disturbance and undermine the character of the street. The cumulative effect of more such conversions in such proximity will steadily erode the area's housing diversity, especially significant when family homes are already in short supply and school rolls are falling. Point 2, transport, refuse and quality of accommodation. Access to the proposed cycle store is only through the kitchen and up and down 2 sets of stairs. The applicant has suggested thin wheeling ramps, but these do not make the arrangement compliant. London Plan T5 and Hackney LP42 require cycle parking to be step-free, safe and convenient. Transport officers have said that details of the cycle store are to be secured by condition. However, this compliance is not actually possible. Bin storage is proposed on a raised platform at the front light well. Waste officers have already stated this would obscure the basement window and have a negative effect on the room in front of it. The bins will seriously degrade the living conditions in that room and goes against LP22. Also, planners have clearly said that they will reject any gate for the store, and so bins will be exposed and overspill onto the street. In addition to this, the small attic room is not fit for purpose. The ceiling is too low and it's a newly built room, and contrary to LP22. Can anyone hear me? Due to the low ceiling and the overheating risks. Point 3, and this is really important in relation to the last judgment, which is the flawed established C4 assumption, which we must challenge. Planners appear to treat the property's recent small HMO use as fully established and are now assessing the change as only 3 additional occupants and applying reduced standards for cycling, parking and affordable rent and ignoring the C3 dwelling house family home loss. This is both shocking and incorrect. The lawful use of the property remains C3. The recent use C4 has been in place for only 6 months, far short of the 10 years required, as I understand it, for lawful status, and I have circulated a document in relation to this. Until then, it should carry no statutory weight and must be challenged. The full impacts, including the loss of family housing, cycle parking and amenity, must be assessed for the entire 9-person HMO. Point 4, the fallback position. This relates to point 3.
Yeah.
The applicant may argue there is a fallback to a 6-person HMO. This is misleading. The General Permitted Development Order, Class L, protects properties capable of providing a single dwelling. It allows temporary changes between C4 and small C and C3 dwelling house and small C4, precisely to retain family housing flexibility. To disregard this creates a very dangerous precedent for the borough. Granting permanent sui generis status would remove this protection. The small HMO is not established, it carries minimal weight and cannot justify such a fallback position. This proposal fails on amenity, design, transport and accommodation quality and results in the loss of a family home. It should be refused. I hope you could hear me.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here to speak again on this application as a long-standing Lea Bridge ward councillor. It's not an exaggeration to say that the circumstances that have been described tonight and other issues arising out of ill-planned, ill-considered, unsuitable conversions of family homes in this particular area of the ward to HMOs have been a significant part to myself and my colleagues' recent casework in terms of supporting residents and tenants. It's not a satisfactory situation for anybody, and I remain concerned about the cohesion of the community in this area with these developments being allowed to continue. This application should, for all the reasons so eloquently stated by Eva, be refused. I disagree that this application is materially different from the last application for this same property that was considered by this committee. In particular, this application, as I understand it, provides no amenity space for the 9 people that are being, asked to live in this property. Blurton Road is a residential street in the heart of Clapton, containing a mixture of privately owned, private rented and social housing, including supported accommodation for vulnerable residents. I would really like to draw your attention to the fact that the architecture in Blurton Road is unusual. These are not the, the standard Victorian terraces. They are tall, narrow houses with small rooms and dugout basements, which is accessible by steep steps. Particularly draw your attention to the fact that the properties don't have front gardens and are situated on a narrow strip of pavement. Blurton Road houses are intended as family homes and, provide very suitable accommodation for 1 or 2 households. The rooms are narrow and the common parts are small. This conversion, even though it's been reduced by 1, does not provide suitable accommodation for 9 people. The property is creating a large HMO. The lack of front gardens attached to these properties means there's limited space for residents to store their wheelie bins, and I remain unconvinced by the proposals for managing waste. In our experience, there's been considerable problems really as ward councillors with rubbish bags quickly attracting fly tipping and creating an environmental hazard. That's a quite significant, issue in this part of the ward. Complaints around this have been a significant part of our casework and causes expense to the council in clearing up. As I've said before, and I think we all agree, high quality HMO accommodation rightly forms part of the Hackney's development plan. But unfortunately, this application is not seeking to provide this. This is, inadequate application and should be turned down. It doesn't provide the high quality accommodation that tenants, a lot of them vulnerable, deserve. And it also interferes with the amenity and community surrounding them. Granting this application will be significantly disruptive to the quality of life of residents in the street. I'm particularly concerned about the kitchen facilities and the common parts. Although I accept there has been additional kitchen facilities, there is no, as I understand it from the application, there is no communal area, and there'll be inadequate space for residents to gather together and enjoy the amenities of the kitchens, and that I would submit that is against LP 22. The kitchen will continue to be a hazardous thoroughfare for bikes. LP 22 clearly states that proposals for new HMOs will only be supported if they do not result in the loss of existing housing stock suitable for family accommodation. Through a circuitous route, that is what has happened here. And that is what, as the chair has pointed out, that is what our planning policy appears to be permitting, that developers can create a small HMO and then, easily convert that to a large HMO. And that is a type of, unsuitable development that you would be, continuing to permit if you grant this application. It provides substandard accommodation and is creating an unmanageable situation in relation to waste, as well as not fulfilling the transport requirements. I'd ask the committee to refuse this application for the reasons stated, and we're particularly relying on the very eloquent points made by Eva. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely, well timed. Right. Yep. Good evening, sir. Thank you for waiting. Off you go. You got 10 minutes. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm not so used to the echoing of the whole. So, first of all, good evening, members, and thanks for allowing me to speak. I think with tonight's date, I'd rather sit in the Houses of Parliament with tonight's date on 5th of November, but it's a bit similar here. So now, given that this application has got a history, I think it's important to address a little bit of the background of this application, of the previous refusal, especially that a previous refusal is a material consideration in any new application. And the courts have said that planning decisions have to be consistent, meaning that one cannot add new reasons of refusal to a later application. So to start on that note, the property is a relatively large 3-story house, plus a mansard roof, which includes additional 2 rooms. Each floor has got 3 rooms, relatively nice sized rooms, with another 2 in the mansard roof. That's a total of 11 rooms in the house. This application follows the previous application, which was recommended for approval to the committee, but it was subsequently refused by committee. Given that the current application seeks to address those reasons for refusal, it's important to have a look at what those were. Is it jumping on and off? No. Okay, there were 4 reasons of refusal. 2 of those related to the lack of a Section 106 agreement, which obviously does not have to be addressed now. These are not, no Section 106 agreement is drafted when something goes to refusal. It's only once it goes to approval, it's agreed that the Section 106 agreement will be agreed and it will address all those remaining points. So the only 2 reasons for refusal relevant to address now are the 2 reasons, the first 2 reasons. One of them was substandard quality of accommodation, and the other one was inadequate provision of cycle storage. Those were the 2 reasons. I listened to the recording of the previous meeting. I wasn't there. And the concerns were mainly about the size of the communal kitchen, if it can serve 10 people. At that point, because the kitchen was more than 1 floor away from some of the bedrooms, a dining area was required within the kitchen. There was 10 occupants, and the council held that given the dining area and the size of the kitchen, and the fact that bikes have to go through that room, would make the kitchen quite small and tight. Those were the reasons said in the minutes of last meeting, and I've heard the recording of it. The other reason of refusal was about the cycle storage having to pass through the house. The current application now seeks to address those reasons of refusal. Now, since submission of this application, it's important, a few points to note. Since submission of this application, the mansard roof has been granted by a separate planning application. Therefore, at the time of the submission, it was included in the description. As of now, it's not relevant to the considerations of this decision because it's been granted already. And I've seen confirmation from Peter Ethmel, who's the head of enforcement, who said that the enforcement case in relation to that mansard roof has been closed and no action will be taken given that it's now completely lawful. That's in terms of the mansard roof. In terms of the use, it's important to note that since the previous application, the property has been changed to a 6-room HMO. It is already in use since July as a 6-room HMO. And the question here, the application here is to add another 3 additional rooms. The 6-room HMO is a material consideration, which I'll get onto that a little bit later. I can just point out, just as if members might want to hear, Number one, it has been held in many planning decisions that the adding from a 6-room HMO to a 7th-room HMO is not a material change of use. It's a different change use class from a C4 to a sui generis, meaning it goes out of use class into a sui generis, but it may well not be a material change of use. And the Act in Section 55 says a change of use is only development if it's a material change of use. One point. Another point, which I want to add is, sorry, I've lost my line of thought. Yeah, in the 6-room HMO, there's no obligation for any developer to allow each and every room of the house to be used. If he does a 6-room HMO, he takes 6 rooms of those, he lets them as an HMO, and the other rooms he can keep locked, vacant. Meaning that not every time you add an additional occupant, it means that you're taking away from area which could potentially be used by other tenants, except in the case, maybe it was discussed before, where there's an existing communal area which would be cut in half, that might be different. But this is not the case in our case. In our case, there are 11 rooms, 6 of them are let, 3 of them are not. So that's another point to consider. I now move on to the merits of the case. There is an existing HMO there, which is a 6-room HMO. The application is for another additional 3 tenants. Policy supports that where there's an existing HMO, it is worthwhile to use that space to provide the maximum provision of HMO use, where there's in any event not a loss of residential or family dwelling. I will address that soon. So that's one thing in support. I'm not aware of any formal, in contrast to the previous, I mean, I've got a bit of a difficulty because it's very similar to the previous case, and I've seen the outcome, but in contrast, there's no known behavioral complaints relevant to this house, not at all. There might have been issues about the bin storage on the road, which we'll come to that later, but there's no behavioral concerns being raised at all. There's been a mention of armed raids along the road, but there's nothing to do with this property. All the rooms comply with HMO standards, and it's important to point out that policy LP22 specifically refers to the HMO standards. It's not a separate piece of policy which is being used. Policy LP22 refers to it, and so it's a highly sustainable area, as the officers pointed out. It's got a PTEL rating of 4. Car parking will be addressed by Section 106. Turning to cycle storage, as the officer said, you have to consider the context and the constraints of the site. And it's important to note, the property now is in use as a 6-room HMO without any control and cycle provision. There's nothing pushing the developer to create a ramp for the cycles to be taken through the house, for him to do any cycle storage in the rear. Absolute no controls for him to do that. However, this planning application is an opportunity for the council to enhance the living conditions by imposing conditions on waste and on cycle storage, which will only enhance the development rather than leave it in the current state, where there's no control on cycle or waste storage. There was mention about the bay window. First of all, this is a small front garden, which in any event will be affected. Any window will be affected by bins if they are stored there. In fact, if you look at the previous pictures, most of the bins are along the pavement, and we are here providing an enhancement of creating a platform and having them off the pavement. There's no need for a metal gate in front of those bins. And the bay windows got 2 windows which open and will pop outlook and will not be affected at all. Now, if the members don't mind, I've seen there was a struggle before. How does policy work? The 2 policies, on the one hand, the protection of loss of residential, of family dwellings, and on the other hand, the fallback position of an HMO. And there was a struggle about it here. If the members are happy, I could address that. Now, the point is like this. If you give me permission to address that point, I can. Otherwise, I will wait to be questioned on it. So it's either you give me permission to address that, and I might go over the 10 minutes, or I don't address that, and I address it when I'm questioned. So I'm asking, do the members want me to address the point that members struggled before, how the two policies work together, or should I wait to address that when being questioned about it? Okay, because I think there's an important error of law existing in the room, and as Chris said before, is subject to cost applications, which might well arise if this point is not explained properly. Thanks very much. Just a sec.
Okay, that's time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Right, we move to questions from the committee. Councillor Susan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask officers, in respect of the London Plan, D4, delivering good design, can you tell me why or how a good design is in respect of these bathrooms, that they are very small and should be at least 2 square meters? And this doesn't seem to me to be a good design. And is it the 2 square meter bathrooms for the 3 rooms, or do all the rooms just have these very small bathrooms? So in respect of relevant planning policy and property licensing, could you just explain a little bit more about these very small 2 square meter bathrooms, which don't seem to fit the criteria of a good design?
Yes, thank you. And sorry, I should have said that at the start of my presentation. But yeah, within the addendum, we have had comments from property licensing saying that the shower cubicles should be 2 square meters with full-sized wash hand basins. As I've commented below, of course, this relates to property licensing standards and not strictly is a planning policy requirement. As such, a planning policy in relation to good design, each of the proposed bedrooms would exceed the minimum internal space standards. And in that respect, it is felt as the rooms themselves could accommodate the larger shower trays. As such, the proposal would still provide high quality accommodation and good design.
But that would there be a compromise in respect of getting a property license?
I mean, the officer themselves, the property licensing officer, said there's sufficient room within each bedroom to accommodate larger sized shower trays in order to obtain a property licensing.
But that hasn't been done.
No, but that sits outside of planning control.
Councillor Norcross next.
Yeah, so I remember this application coming last time, and obviously we all unanimously voted against it last time for the reasons set out. I think a lot of the concerns that I have are very similar to the concerns raised about the last application, so I'll try and focus on some new ones here. My question's around the retrospective development element of this and the precedent that's set. So I think, as the report shows, and as the discussion last time shows, the applicant seemed to commence works on the property before, applying for planning permission. Some of those were then refused planning permission, enforcement action was taken. This has clearly happened here. The mansard roof, there was a question about the kind of height of the roof last time, I think, about whether that created, appropriate amenity space. That's not mentioned in this report, but I know the mansard roof has been granted planning permission now. There seems to be a pattern here of the applicant and, doing things to this property, not asking permission and sort of seeking forgiveness and doing it retrospectively, which concerns me. And I'm just wondering, if what kind of precedent does this set in terms of, allowing people to sort of take this approach and take a retrospective approach to these sort of planning applications. If we refuse this application, given that the work has already been done, and I think, as you said, a 6-bedroom HMO doesn't mean there's going to be more amenity space. It just means that the rooms are going to be locked up because the rooms are already there. If we were to refuse this application, what enforcement action would be taken? And what would the likely outcome of that be? Is kind of my question after that long spiel.
Yes, I mean, if Sorry, so if enforcement action were to be taken if the property was occupied by 9 persons?
Yeah, does this set, my general question is, does this set kind of a sort of precedence really about, allowing people to sort of approving retrospective applications in this way? And if we were to refuse it, what enforcement action would be taken and what would the likely outcome of that be?
Sure.
I mean, I would say this work has been done, is my point.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't serve as a precedent, though. Of course, the application is before us to regularise any unlawful works, and each application is to be treated on its own merits. Of course, as per officer recommendation, the scheme is deemed to comply with relevant policies of the local plan and the development plan as a whole, and therefore is before us as a recommendation for approval. Should this application be refused, the property would be required to be occupied by 6 persons and operate as a small HMO. Of course, if that wasn't to be the case, then enforcement action would be taken on its occupancy.
Just on the point as well that also came up in the last application around the kind of the fallback position being this is a 6-bedroom HMO, not a family dwelling. The objector, apologies, I've completely forgotten your name, cited some planning law saying that it needs to be in existence for 10 years to be recognised as such. I just wonder if you could comment on that, because that's obviously different to what we were told in the previous application in terms of whether something, becomes an HMO or a single family dwelling and how quickly that process can change between the two.
Of course, I think the 10-year has come from the immunity from enforcement action being taken. So if there's an unlawful change of use from a property, let's say from a small HMO to a large HMO, a planning permission is required. If that change of use has been undertaken and operates for over 10 years, then that becomes immune from enforcement action. But in terms of the use of a C3 family dwelling to a small HMO, that can be established, like Lawrence said, my colleague, the day of it commencing. There's no requirement for that having been undertaken for a certain period of time to then be lawfully operating as a small HMO.
And can I discuss the objective? You have a comment on that, basically.
Sorry, obviously I'm not a planner, but I have done a lot of research on this. I just feel that the spirit and the law of the local plan and the sort of London plan are being completely exploited. This is just a Trojan horse, essentially. And, up until the builders arrived, prior to any planning have been granted, I mean, it was refused repeatedly. The mansard was put up and taken down again because it didn't comply. It's like everyone's just riding roughshod over the actual spirit. And I think if we allow this to happen, then the whole local plan is a nonsense. And yes, of course, you could operate this as a 6-bedroom HMO and just leave 3 rooms locked. I mean, 6 people in the house I don't have a problem with it, although I do have a problem with the fact that 1 room is now occupied by a family with a baby, because that's substandard accommodation for those people. I have also had to sort out the fire alarms going off for 2 elderly residents quite recently. And I think contrary to your suggestion, there's been no sort of issues. There's actually been enforcement by refuse, I think, on a number of occasions. And I think the amenity of the lower ground floor room will massively be infringed by this bin platform. And also, actually, so will my ground floor room. Also, in your plans, the window of the current kitchen is shown incorrectly. It's actually a single opening window, which is opening the entire time, although we requested that it should only be able to be open at a higher level. And the lights are on the entire time. It totally overlooks my kitchen, so I've had to put tracing paper up on my window. A 6-bedroom HMO is fine. A 9-bedroom HMO is a materially different consideration, and the council should be looking at the mix of properties in the area and not allowing this to happen. And just while I'm at it, may I just say the licensing is a nonsense. We have a house across the road that has a license. There was an armed raid there the other week. There was even one on our road owned by Newland. There was an armed raid for drugs there. One of the houses is squatted, And can I say on the property you're referring to, the door entry system has been buzzing now for 3 weeks. I have complained about this, nothing has happened. I have no faith in the management of this property. The regard for planning law has been shocking. And up until a year ago, it was a family house. And as I understand it, Mr. Pode, is still classed as a C3 dwelling. It says that at the beginning of your report. And it was established in the last meeting.
Thank you. Can you turn your microphone off? Eva, please. Thank you. Councillor Potter.
I've got a couple of questions. So first of all, just picking up on the space of the bedrooms. So I appreciate you saying that there's more room to expand the shower cubicles, but given there's no living room space, can you just comment on the sufficiency of the space of those bedrooms given? I know we've got an extra kitchen and it's a kitchen diner, but it's not, you know, an area to live in as such. So what would your thoughts be on the bedroom space given there's no living room area, which seems ever more important when you've got a household with a baby in one of the bedrooms? And I suppose the other comment I would just come to you, sir. Obviously, Eva's talked about the management. It's not gone quite as smoothly as you perhaps have presented. So I wonder what management arrangement you have in terms of kind of supervision and kind of oversight of the tenants, but also the arrangement for local residents to communicate. I think Eva said 3 weeks she tried to communicate. Is that right, Eva?
I have communicated with the owner. I've been unable to communicate with the management company. And the reason I have the owner's number is because I met him when I was talking to him about them starting the work without the planning permission. He only answers my calls if I withhold the number.
Right, okay. So we need some clarity on the management arrangement. It doesn't seem adequate. If you could talk about the space standards given there's no living room area.
Yes, of course. So, I mean, obviously the provision of additional kitchen and dining area with seating, as I previously stated, would provide or meet the requirements of London Plan Policy LP22 in providing high quality communal spaces. Just to note, there is no specific requirement for a living area to be provided. But as I've mentioned, both kitchens would be of an appropriate size and form in terms of their layout, both being kind of rectangular in footprint, to provide sufficient space for the size of a table and no awkward corners to navigate. The scheme has been considered or reviewed by our property licensing team, who deems the scheme to be acceptable in terms of providing sufficient or adequate provision of communal spaces. And of course, this is a betterment to the previous scheme that was proposed.
So just picking up on something that was said earlier. So this is for a nine bedroom, 9-person HMO. Currently you said, well, there's a couple and a baby living at the property. So that's, you know, that's 3 people in a room at the moment in the property. The sort of space standards for the different bedrooms set out here, there are 2 rooms that, you know, meet the double bedroom requirement. Is there a larger requirement for what is essentially a 3-person room? You know, what would that be like? You would class that as a studio? And given that, you know, we previously discussed how you can't impose new conditions on existing residents, how would there being a family essentially living in one of the rooms at the moment in the property impact on this application?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the occupancy of the bedrooms, that would be controlled by licensing. They themselves would need to be aware there's obviously a child sharing a bedroom. For the purposes of planning application, the scheme is for a 9-bedroom, 9-person, and is deemed to be assessed on that basis. So the occupancy would essentially be dependent on the licensing that's granted, license is granted.
Any other questions? Councillor Rout.
Might seem a small thing, but if I look at the upstairs kitchen, I can't see how anybody could sit in one of those dining spaces with the mansard roof unless they're a child.
Yeah, so I mean, following the amendments to made to the mansard roof extension to ensure it provides habitable accommodation, both as a residential extension and for the purposes of the HMO application, the height as shown by this image above would be at 1.9 metres, rising to 2.14 metres, the majority of the mansard roof extension, internal height.
May I ask another question about the bathrooms? Sorry. What I'm not clear about is the bathrooms are set out at the moment. We've got square meterage, which is below the 2 square meters, isn't it? So when we talk about that they could be extended, are we talking about significant building works to knock the walls down and extend them? And would that be required before they could be properly licensed?
I mean, the agent might be better to respond, but I understand that there's partition walls that need to be removed and made larger, yes. Of course, the floor plans are indicative and could be subject to amendments to ensure they meet the resident licensing standards, yes.
But we're talking about some significant works here in order to make this compliant for licensing, aren't we? If that's the case.
I mean, that'd be the case for any property that's requiring a license for a large HMO, yeah.
Yeah, so it just seems strange to me that we would approve the planning knowing that they're going to have to change this to fit the licensing.
Don't think that's the first time that we've rode 2 horses in terms of planning approval, and then they have to go and sort their house out with licensing, you know. That does not necessarily affect our decision on the planning application, but they will probably have to go and sort it out, yes. Do you have anything to say, or are you okay? You're slightly twitching.
No, that's correct, Councillor. Just had one point to respond to one of Councillor Narcross's questions regarding retrospective applications and enforcement as well. The processes and procedures are not Hackney specific, and it's set out in legislation. And retrospective applications are not unlawful or prevented. However, we do warn against them, and they can be very costly should any subsequent application be refused. So that's where enforcement kicks in. If enforcement action is taken and we require, say, a structure to be taken down, that would be, the onus would be on the developer to rectify that.
Just on that, so the mansard roof was obviously given planning permission retrospectively. Presumably that was applied for during the enforcement action, which is why the enforcement action was stopped. Given the height of that floor, is there a difference in the required height for what is kind of, you know, communal amenity space like a kitchen dining room area versus a bedroom? Because I can see an argument that a bedroom, you wouldn't need so much headroom because, you know, lying down is a primary use for that room. Whereas something like a kitchen where you are, you know, standing up, moving around, there's multiple people in there, it is a communal space. If there's any difference in the kind of height requirements for that, and does this, if this mansard roof was part of this application, would that meet the required height for a space of that kind?
So two separate processes really. The mansard was granted under its own separate application for the purpose it was granted for at the time. So if you were to review the accommodation standards now, it would need to be suitable for HMO licensing purposes.
All right. So my question was, obviously it was, yeah, like you say, it was granted for its purpose at the time. Now this application is to put a kitchen space in there. Is there a difference in kind of required height for a space like a kitchen than there is for a bedroom?
No, unless there's an objection or it's contrary to the planning permission, no enforcement action would be taken against the existing floor height.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Sadek.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the waste management situation where the 9-person HMO usage to be permitted. I just note in the paragraph, or one of the paragraphs describing this in the report we've got, there's recognition from officers that the platform space would be limited, and we've seen the picture graphic that you shared earlier. there is room for 5 bins, but there's very limited space to maneuver, especially when you factor in that the recycling bags will presumably also be stored in that space alongside the food caddy. It just looks likely to be extremely crowded, assuming that all waste is taken to this platform. The second, another observation made by officers, is the placement of the platform is not ideal. And in my view, it looks very likely to affect the amenity of the basement room in a way which, whether or not on the technicality of the recommendation is you know, hits the threshold for being unacceptable, it's certainly very undesirable that you would place those bins there and the impact it would have on residents living in that basement room, but possibly also on neighbours. And then I just note that this paragraph, and I'm looking at page 32 of the report, refers to your assessment of the waste management plan being in the context of the HMO being for a maximum of 9 people, not 9 rooms. And we're being told that the planning process has no say or whether that, you know, has no say on whether it could turn to 12, 15, 18 based on family usage and so on. And that's with the licensing process. So we're potentially being, well, we are being asked to consider that the analysis you've given on the waste, on how waste will be appropriately managed, but with no guarantee whatsoever for our purposes that it will remain at 9 people and will not go beyond that. You know, it's quite conceivable that it would go to, say, 15 people, 12 people, whatever. How does that impact your consideration of the waste management issues? And just to say, you know, as councillors, this is a really important issue and a really significant concern for residents, and it's a problem in this area. My ward is just down the road from here, and I live in the area as well. And this is something that needs to be addressed properly, and this seems like a good opportunity to make sure that we're doing that. And then the last point on this second question, I guess, is how can you use the conditionality attached to any approval to make sure that we see a desirable outcome here and that this doesn't go the way that some residents fear it might? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the occupation of the property, it is described as a 9-bedroom, 9-person HMO. So, I mean, we can't or speculate over a worst case scenario, and the application has been assessed as a 9-person HMO in terms of waste provision, refuse provision, cycles to parking. Like I said, in terms of the actual occupation itself, that would be dealt with property licensing. But of course, the application before us is for a 9-bedroom, 9-person HMO and needs to be considered on that basis. That was the first point. So what was your second point?
It was on conditions and what conditions could be attached to the recommendation. I know there are some, and how do you think they will help to ensure that this problem would be appropriately managed?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously we can only enforce against the condition that's recommended, which is from waste management strategy. We have requested, or we would request, details of a strategy being provided which details responsibilities for both the landlord and the managing agent, as well as those of tenants in relation to managing of waste and recycling. Of course, if it's noted that these aren't being abided by, we can take enforcement action against that, such as the kind of informal storage of bins or refuse on the footway.
But that enforcement action, what would that, the potential consequences under that enforcement action would be, what would they be? Could you explain them to us? Presumably they wouldn't, taking from what you said, they wouldn't have any bearing on the ability to continue using the building as a 9-bedroom HMO. Or could that be a consequence of the ability to do that stripped away if this isn't appropriately managed?
Sure. I mean, my colleagues might know better, but it may be the case that, of course, if they're not abiding by their conditions of the planning permission, the licensing gets involved to revoke the license of that occupation of the property as a large HMO.
I know last time we were concerned about bikes being taken through, and that hasn't been addressed at all in here, really. And the other thing I don't quite get my head round, because it was the previous proposal was for a 10-bed HMO where there was a requirement for 12 cycle spaces. We're now with 1 room less, we end up with just a requirement for 3. How does that make sense? Can you explain that?
Yeah, of course. So Apologies if it didn't come clear in the report, but essentially, given the fact we're talking about a small HMO, which obviously has occupation by 6 occupiers, we can only require under policy the 3 additional bedrooms to provide cycle parking, which wasn't addressed previously. So under the current application, we can only secure, in terms of policy compliant level of cycle parking, 3 parking spaces. I understand concerns previously in terms of cycle parking was about maybe fire safety of the informal parking of bikes within corridors, etc. Of course, under the current application, we are talking about an actual provision of a cycle store where occupiers can store their bikes securely and safely outside of the property, bearing in mind that currently occupiers could store their bikes within corridors within the property, or equally take them through the kitchen already to the rear garden, but having no secure storage for their bike. Because of course, given the constraints of the site, they can't store it to the front of the property.
Sorry. So you're saying before they were able to store them in the property and now they're not? I'm a bit unclear, but I still don't understand. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that now it's because it's gone from a family dwelling to 6 bed, we can only ask about the additional 3. But it still does not make sense to me that we seem to have lost out on cycle parking. You know, I would have thought the applicant, having agreed to more cycle storage before, to go to a lower number, that doesn't seem to me in good spirit to what, you know, we aim for here in Hackney. And can you just talk me through why you think going through the house has been addressed? Because that doesn't seem to have been addressed to me.
Sure. I mean, so I think as discussed under the previous application back in March, of course, we were discussing about the property being used as a small family dwelling. So of course, in terms of turning the property into a large HMO, they were required to provide cycle parking for each of the occupiers. Of course, since that date, the property has been lawfully converted to a small HMO for 6 occupiers or 6 persons. So therefore, we're securing the 3 additional cycle parking spaces for the 3 additional bedrooms. Just in terms of the acceptability of taking the cycles through the property, of course, we do need to kind of attach weight to the fact that existing site circumstances don't make it ideal to store bikes at the front of the property. And therefore, realistically, people are probably taking their bikes through the property to the rear garden to store bikes, if not storing them inside of the property itself for safety and security reasons, given the fact there's no safe store. Under the current application, of course, it doesn't address that issue of taking the bikes through the property, but it does mean there's a safe and secure store for each of the bikes, for each of the occupiers, because bearing in mind, whilst there's a policy requirement to provide 3 parking spaces, the applicant is still providing 10 cycle parking spaces, which is for each of the bedrooms and possibly a visitor.
Applicant is still providing 10 cycle parking spaces, yeah? So
That's it.
sorry.
The image on the slide just shows the 10 cycle parking spaces proposed.
Sorry, that's me, my bad.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Can we bring Eva back in chair, please?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
I'd like to point out, as a resident of the neighbouring house, that the corridor in the house, the hallway, is only 70 centimetres wide. We all cycle in my house. It's extremely difficult to manoeuvre bikes in and out of the house. There's 2 sets of stairs. The wheeling ramp makes no difference at all because obviously the person still has to walk up the stairs. So that's negligible. And there's a really clear policy about this, the cycling issue, and the conditions that are laid down in the local plan about cycling. It's just not suitable. And I think the C3 to C4 issue, which is what came up before, and you're going to be seeing more and more of this, and I think that the councillors should have the courage to test this on all of these cases, or this is how these meetings are going to go in the future. And also, the ruling that the inspector took the last time on the case before, as your chair said, was only one ruling. I've also read other ones where the ability to move between C3 and C4 is to be protected, so that, say, I wanted to rent my house out to a few people for 6 months, I could do that, and then it could become a normal house again. And if we don't act to do this now, well, we're going to see a massive change in our borough. And I think that the committee should have the courage to challenge this essential kind of exploitative use of a loophole.
Councillor Sedek?
I was just going to ask if we can hear from the representative of the applicant on the 2 points that he's sought to speak to.
Yeah, I wouldn't like you to venture into procedural unfairness by allowing the objector an unlimited amount to talk and not giving me any chance at all. I've been raising my hands about 10 times. You somehow have not noticed it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't encourage, the comeback. You've had 10 minutes and to be honest, sir, that is 50% more, in fact, 100%. It's a doubling of the time you.
And the objector had 5 minutes, and I get a permission for 10 minutes, and the objector's had 15 so far. This is procedural unfairness that should be stopped right now. That's what I can tell you. This is proper procedural unfairness. Where there's a council objecting, the agent gets 10 minutes, not the objector 3 times 5 minutes and the agent nothing more. That is procedural unfairness, and it should be noted right here. And now I'm ready to say what I've got to say. Okay?
You've been asked to present.
I know, but I've raised my hands 10 times. You somehow not noticed it.
And I am not.
You can apologize for that. You've noticed the objector's hand 3 times and not noticed mine.
Can I
That's all I'm
apologise?
saying. Okay.
Because I apologise there because I didn't notice your hand.
Yeah,
That is
okay.
why I
There was,
noticed.
for good reason, no questions directed to me because I know the answers. That's why. And nobody wants this to end up an appeal. And as Chris said before, with the cost application, no one wants this. But this is where it's heading. Can I give you the answers for the basic questions that people have asked? Can I do that?
Asked to reply, sir.
Thanks so much. Thanks very much. Yeah. Okay. I want to say I've got a few points to say. Point number 1, the objector has said that one of whom has got a couple and a baby. This is a blatant lie. Just for the members to know, it's a blatant lie and should not be taken at face value. There are 6 occupants in the house, no more. Any additional occupant will be subject to enforcement action. And that is, the enforcement team are very good at that. There's 6 occupants, there's no enforcement matter now open. If this is refused, nothing will be enforced. There's nothing to enforce. There's 6 occupants and that's it. Point number 2, we received an addendum 20 minutes before the committee meeting tonight from the licensing saying that there's a requirement for an ensuite to be 2 square meters. There is, as far as I know, no such requirement. I responded straight away and I was told that I will get a response by email. I have so far not received that response. Point number 3, the previous application was for 10 rooms with a single communal kitchen. Now it's gone down to 9 rooms with a double communal kitchen. That's not a reduction in occupancy, it's a double in kitchens. In the minutes of last meeting, one of the members said we would be happy with the 8-room HMO with a single kitchen. We've now got a 9-room HMO with a double kitchen. The floor has been lowered since the last refusal, as was mentioned on the plans last time, and that's that point. The point about management, which have been interestingly directed to the objector, not to myself. Management, there is proper management of the property. There's never been any social behavior problems. The only problems that have been is with waste on the street, which that will persist if this application is refused because there's nothing pushing the developer to sort that out because there's no controls about that. The objector wrote to the managing agent. I've seen copies of those emails, and on the same day, within 24 hours, the street was cleaned. It is simply another blatant lie to say that nothing was done about that. I've seen the email copies and the thank you for working with me so quick on that. I've seen those. I can share them around. I don't think the committee wants that. I've got them on file here. The other important point is about occupancy. Now, about 9 occupants, the council can impose a condition that there may not be more than 9 occupants. It's as the officer said, it's within the description in any event, but if they want to be more secure, they can impose a condition that there may not be more than 9 occupants in the house, and that's properly enforceable, and that's a standard condition, which I do dozens of these types of applications. This is a standard condition. The point of the cycles, what the officer was saying is that really the developer is only supposed to supply cycle parking for 3 of the occupants, because those are additional to what's there now, uncontrolled. However, the developer is proposing 10, so that's an enhancement and removing a fire hazard of what's there now. If this application is refused, there'll be 6 occupants there with no cycle store at all. The cycles will be a fire hazard. They'll be all over the place. So what we're saying is that this application is not only enhancing for the 3 additional occupants, it's enhancing the living conditions and the waste conditions and all the other matters for all current 6 occupants, which are currently uncontrolled. I have not addressed the point which you struggle about, the policy contradiction. I can do that if asked. Interestingly, nobody asked me, although it was a major struggle in the previous case. I can address that. I've won many appeals where committee members were not aware of the law, where Section 70 of the Act says that you should not follow the development plan if there is a material consideration. There is a material consideration. That's the current use. The current use is a 6-room HMO, which happens in 1 minute, as both officers has confirmed, and not 10 years as the object has confirmed. Class L of the GPTO does not say it has to be temporary. It can be permanently changed from C3 to 6.4, vice versa, when at whim. There's no law that it has to be temporary. You're being misled by the objector, both in terms of facts and in terms of law. And I urge you to take account of this. Otherwise, as Chris Poe said before, we'll end up with a cost matter, which is nobody wants that. Thanks very much. And I'm sorry about my outburst before. I was a bit upset about what's going on. No questions were suddenly directed to me, although they were very asked before. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Cross.
I'm struggling a bit that one of the primary arguments feels to me to be, you know, we've done this, you're just going to have to suck it up, because I feel like that's very much what's being presented here. You know, we talked about the issues around waste only being able to be addressed by the developer if we grant planning permission for this. You know, nothing about this application makes me feel like this developer is trying to build high quality accommodation that we want to see in Hackney. This feels like an application that's designed to cram as many people as they can get away with into this property. You know, it meets the letter of you know, our planning policy, but I just don't feel, as has been raised, that it meets the spirit, and I just don't like the way that this has been approached at all. I would be interested to know whether it is possible to add a condition about the occupancy. There clearly is a disagreement between the person speaking in favour and the speaking against about whether there is a family currently living in there. That concerns me. If there is a baby living in this property, that is not what this application is being presented as. So if there's anything we can do to sort of strengthen our controls there, I'd be really interested in hearing that.
Do you want to apply on that one, yeah?
Yes, I mean, of course, we can condition the occupancy of the property to 9 persons under the planning application as well as the licensing. The description of development refers to 9 persons, but we haven't recommended a condition as of yet for it to be occupied by 9 people.
If it gets the whole, you know, if everyone else agrees that, yeah? Sir, your hand is on.
A condition has not yet been recommended, but it can be. This is a standard condition. About the point about people building, what the intention is, obvious, I agree to you, the intention is earning money, but this provides us, the council, an opportunity to control the use of the whole house. So we have to look at that in that lens. We cannot now, it's not a planning consideration whether it's a good boy or a bad boy. The point is, it's not illegal to build without planning permission. It happens all the time, unfortunately. But we've got now an opportunity to control the use of the full house, not only the 3 additional tenants, otherwise there's 6 tenants, uncontrolled, waste, cycles, fire hazards, no control whatsoever, no planning control at all.
Eva, we've heard the arguments, yeah. Unless there's some new point.
If the house remains as a 6-room HMO, surely the other conditions, such as safety of the tenants and the waste disposal and all those issues, would have to be controlled by licensing. There should still be an obligation on the landlord.
Okay, look, this is not a debate. This is not a debate, yeah? It's been given to the officers, all right? Okay. All right, I'm going to say something. So trying to be consistent here. We are about applying the law and our planning policy. That's what we do, yeah? Now, our policy says that we are okay with HMOs if they provide a good standard of accommodation, all the requirements, space standards, management requirements, we can boost that up, refuse arrangements, we can boost that up. Daylight and sunlight, I am a bit surprised. I share the concerns raised in terms of whether rays of sunshine will actually make it to some of the windows in this. The quality of accommodation, I do feel sorry for whoever's in Unit 6, because not only they have their own ensuite, but they seem to have sharing a wall with someone else's ensuite toilet as well. And I can't imagine how pleasant that is. But that aside, it still comes back to amenity space. There is no amenity space. I am surprised, I mean, I do, you know, there are 2 kitchens, but we are talking at least 9. Yeah, 9 bedrooms, 9 people in this kitchen with the option of going to the loft. And again, the size of the people being able to sit at the table is a question mark. There is no amenity space for the people that live in these 9 rooms. And that's what our policy says. We are agreeing to create a house for at least 9 bedrooms, but it does not provide a good standard of accommodation because there is no amenity space. I don't know how they will possibly cook at the same time. And I think it's in breach of what we want to see in terms of HMO standards. That's my point of view. I'm not taking it. If there's no more comments or questions for the committee, I will move it to the vote. Councillor Potter.
Can I just say, when you say amenity space, are you referring to living room space? Or are you referring to kitchen dining room space?
Amenity space, something that isn't a kitchen. A lounge. Somewhere to sit that's not possibly in the kitchen. Where people will be cooking around you.
Can I ask a question of the applicant, Chair?
Sure.
Would you be willing to consider the going down to 8 units and having one of those units as a living room area?
I believe that would be a separate application. I doubt it we would amend this one because if refused, my client would definitely want to take it to appeal. What we could do, there's no requirement to have 2 communal kitchens. The space standards say that the one is enough. We could make the spare kitchen, the second kitchen, into a lounge room rather. Somebody has asked before what the height is. I've actually been in that room and it's quite a comfortable room because the way the mansard is and the floor was dropped, it's quite large. You can see on the plan the heights. So that room could be turned into a lounge if need be, because the kitchen is large enough for an HMO. And I stress again, LP 22 refers to the HMO standards. There's no requirement for a lounge. But I'm sure my client will be happy to provide that. And we must also remember that this one is different to the previous case. It's got access to the garden. So there's a full garden available for the tenants. So that's the answer. So this application could be amended by using one of them as a lounge, but otherwise it would require a new plan application.
Councillor Stoke.
Thanks, yeah. It was just on your point, which I think you were inviting us to comment on the articulation of this about having no amenity and there being no living area. I think for me, the overarching problem would be that the standard of accommodation here, given its intended usage and the intended occupancy, which will be at least 9 people, is in my view substandard. And I think the committee can point to a number of different considerations that contribute to that overall, my overall conclusion that it would be substandard. One of those is inadequate communal space. It's not, I take the point that there's no requirement for there to be one, but in taking into account in the round, whether the non-bedroom spaces in this property are appropriate for the number of people that are likely to be dwelling here, including use as a kitchen and use of that kitchen space, amenity space to do other things like sit down and relax and talk to your others living in the property. Overall, that's a big concern, the inadequacy of those communal spaces. I think the situation with cycling, I take the nuance that officers and the applicant have given to us, but my concern would still be the impact of having storage for 9+ people for cycling at a time when we're hugely encouraging use of cycling as a mode of transport in the borough, coming through the property, being very difficult to get up that staircase. For me, that also impacts amenity. The waste management situation I just find untenable is my sense, and that the introduction of a platform that has quite a significant effect on the enjoyment of the basement room, that seems to me to be problematic. So taking all these things together in the round and not pointing to any specific issue that's been raised, that to me leads me to a finding that this has to be seen as substandard. And my personal view is that this is a significant intensification of the use of a property that isn't reasonably intended to be used in this way, and isn't necessarily what we want to see. So that's my sense. That's my attempt to articulate it in a way that goes beyond just saying there is no amenity space.
Thank you, nicely articulated. Any other comments? Otherwise, I will move to the vote.
I just wanted to say that the owner of the house did respond to my requests about moving the rubbish. It was Elevate Property Management who did not respond. So I just wanted to make that clear. It was not Mr. Schwartz. He did respond.
Okay, thank you for the point of clarity. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you that we're all clear. So the recommendation, grant planning commission subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement. Those in favour of this application, please show. Those against this application, please show. If I say those abstaining. So, Councillor Zizek, do you wish to make an alternative proposal that this application is rejected on the grounds as you stated?
Yeah.
And is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Norcross. Would you like 5 minutes to? Thank you.
Hey, Monsieur, we are going to take a short break again while the legal officer and planning officers consult about alternative motions. Could you throw at the screen, please? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a woo. Monsieur, I believe everybody is now back in the room, so I think we can continue. Thank you. Right.
Oh, at least they're having a laugh, that's great.
We're going to continue, folks. Okay? Hey, everybody.
Officers,
Yeah.
can we
Mr.
move?
Paterson, sir,
Can we
please, you
move
can take your seat.
to-
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Would you mind closing the door? Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
Somebody can do
yep,
that.
lovely.
Thank you.
John Sang, have you got the proposal, please?
Chris, with the wording,
Thank
please.
Yeah, so similarly, again, the reason for refusal would read, by reason of the inadequate substandard quality of accommodation proposed, the proposed large house multiple occupation would be detrimental to living conditions of future occupiers. The proposed development would therefore conflict with policies LP2 and LP22 of the Hackney Local Plan 2020.
Thank you. Those in favour of that recommendation, please show. Thank you very much. Thank you for your efforts.
So that is
there.
unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your quick turnaround there of the wording. That is clear, and we will move on. Agenda item 7, delegated decisions. Have you noted the delegated decision? Yep, thank you very much. Agenda item 8, any other business? I consider to be urgent now. I'm not aware of any from the committee. No, thank you very much. Please note the next meeting is on Wednesday, the 19th of November, which is a date change.
Not really. It's a meeting change. It was originally proposed as a pre-application
Yes.
meeting, but
I'd like to make a point before this gentleman leaves.
I think
That he will not respond to
No,
any.
I think
I
we've
can't-
finished
I
that
can't
item
take
now.
these. I can't take these.
I apologize.
Yep, this isn't a, I'm sure you can understand this, Rothschild. Then that is a matter, and I think we can have a discussion about, as you said, places that you can take your complaints to, yeah? But the decision has been made. We can't review that. I'm just concluding the meeting. And it is 19th of November, but it is a formal planning meeting. Yeah, Councillor Sadek.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, just in relation to the point that the applicant from the previous item has raised, just because as we sat here and saw the conversation going on, I just want to make clear and have it on record that to the extent that the representative of the applicant was frustrated about anecdotes from the current usage of the house and things that may or may not be going on, we didn't take, I certainly didn't place any weight on individual circumstances that are occurring in the property now. Those were current anecdotes. They were not informative of our decision, which relate to the reasons that we articulated. So there's absolutely no basis for any claim from the applicant that that were the case and that the decision were disproportionately weighted on irrelevant considerations, just to make that clear.
I hope that what we seek to do here is make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And as I have repeated, that we apply the law and our policy. So people can say they're non-material considerations. I hear enough from committee members, let's be honest now. Okay, but I think that these conversations need to be had in a planning committee, but we seek to make our decisions based on planning grounds, yeah? We understand fully that we are quasi-judicial and these are the decisions, yeah, that we agree, okay? We're not politicians here. So there we go. I'm very sorry for the disagreement there. You know, we've heard the arguments, we've made a decision which we believe to be based on planning permission, okay? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And I will end the meeting there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Monsieur, if you could stop the live stream and the recording, please. Thank you.